Alright guys, now if that doesn't get your heart beating, then I don't know. Welcome to the KTM 990 Duke presentation. As we said, we stay with the no bullshit approach. So really reduced all the essentials that you need, but obviously we're on hand to answer any questions. So what I would like to do is just quickly look into the history. Now KTM is not a nostalgic brand, we don't look back, but I think it's very important as we're celebrating 30 years of Duke that we take a look back to see where we've come from and then also the evolution through the years. I think first and foremost we need to spend a little bit of time with the KTM 620 Duke. So this is the first year introduction of the Duke name. We actually have the motorcycle as you guys saw in the lobby as well, and that is number 1 off the production line. So quite a special motorcycle. And as I said, I want to take a little bit of time at this slide for the pure reason of history. Does anyone know where and how this development process happened? Anyone have any idea? I guess not, right? Okay, so very interesting. There was absolutely no market research done. Nothing at all. It was pure gut feeling. Now you might know the name Wolfgang Felber. He's currently in charge of our MotoGP chassis department. And in 1993, Wolfgang was a very young engineer in the R&D department, specifically focusing on off-road. But he had a massive passion for street racing and specifically Grand Prix racing. Wolfgang decided to, as I said, with no research, build something completely crazy. Something that most of the other manufacturers said, it doesn't make any sense. So what Wolfgang did is he took a 620 Enduro LC4 and he put 17-inch wheels on it, shortened the suspension, and essentially built what we see here. Now, admittedly, in 1993, when he built the first prototype, it didn't look very good. And they actually gave it the nickname of the Predator, which is actually quite funny because when we launched the 990 Duke, we saw some comments of the front headlight referring to a Predator. So, complete coincidence, but quite interesting. So, Wolfgang presented this motorcycle to Mr. Stefan Perrer and Hubert Trunkenpolz, and they admitted that it doesn't look very good. Luckily, at the same time, Mr. Gerald Kiska was approached to reinvent the KTM brand, and the two merged and basically produced what we see here. First production was in 1994, and then our final production, as you see there, in 1997. Does anyone know where the Duke name comes from? No? So as I said, Wolfgang was such an enthusiast road racer. He came up with a short list of names, and one of his heroes was Jeff Duke, which was obviously a Grand Prix winner, world champion. And the Duke name basically was brought to life there, or continued when we launched this product. As I said, we're not going to spend too much time, but I thought this is quite interesting. And these are generally not facts that you can read anywhere. So giving you guys that information for us was crucial. As you can see, we launched the 640 Duke in 1999, and you can see a massive step forward in terms of the design element. And you can really see Kiska's design language being introduced into the model. And this is really, I would say, is where the styling and the Duke character started really coming to life. Bring on 620 Duke, introduced in 2008, ran it all the way into 2010, also with the first introduction of an R version, quite an iconic motorcycle. But then, what happened then? We took a massive step forward on the 690 Duke. As you guys know, very iconic motorcycle. We labeled it the ultimate single-cylinder naked machine. And as you can see, running all the way from 2012 to 2018, and you can see multiple updates, even a complete power parts track bike. And you still see some of these motorcycles in circulation and on the road today, so very iconic motorcycle. Again, another massive step forward for us in 2018 with the introduction of the KTM 790 Duke, which is obviously a product that we still manufacture and produce today. Very important, we stopped production of this specific motorcycle in Mattighofen in 2020, and we moved the production in 2022 to China with our joint venture with CF Moto. And I'm going to make it very clear because I see there's a lot of misperception out in the market. Currently, we only produce the KTM 790 Duke and the KTM 790 Adventure in China. So that's status quo as we stand today. As I said, I see a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding out in the market. So as we said, still currently running in China and a big volume seller for us in our market. For the first time ever, we launched the R version before we launched the standard version. I know for a lot of you, this must have been or must be one of your favorite motorcycles, hopefully until today, until you ride this. But in 2020, we launched the KTM 890 Duke R, And then 2 years later, we launched that beautiful Atlantic blue CTG color. So as I said, we launched the R first, and then we introduced the standard 890 Duke. Only 1 year production on that one because of the shift to China with the 790 Duke production. But we had a continuation of this platform, or we had different derivatives rather. In 2022, we saw the GP version, which was obviously, as I'm sure a lot of you could understand, it's drew its inspiration from our Tech 3 days back in MotoGP. So a lot of inspiration drew there. And then followed up with a black derivative. And I think that's status quo as we stand today. All right, so guys, you've all met Stefano. Stefano Branco is the product manager for this lovely motorcycle here. A lot of development done, a lot of late hours in the office. I think first and foremost, is this a rehash of the KTM 890 Duke?
That's exactly the main talking point about this bike. We have to consider that the KTM 990 Duke, it's a complete new development, and you will figure out during our presentation why we say that it's a complete new development. Consider that it's not just a new bike, but it's a new platform for KTM, the 990 platform in general. The bike is not anymore an 890 Duke in any sense, in any part. It's a more ambitious bike that is grow up in terms of shapes, and now it's really starting to refer to the Super Duke. When we say sometimes that we are referring to the Super Duke, are not just words, are not just stuff to mention, but basically are really parts. This bike shares a lot of parts with the Super Duke. The designer is also the same of the Super Duke, and in general the mindset is grow up in terms of riding experience and of power. We like to say that basically the KTM 990 Duke is knocking at the door of our Super Duke.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a bold statement, and when you mentioned that to me the first time, I said, yeah, that sounds like marketing, blah, blah.
Like, are you sure?
Exactly, are you sure about that? And I think that's what we want to show you guys, is through this presentation that we are actually we brought this motorcycle a lot closer to the 1390. So also, I think good to mention, from today on, we will have obviously our 125, 250 and 390 Duke. We will have our KTM 790 Duke, then the 890 Duke is completely discontinued. We have quite a massive gap to the 990 Duke and then the 1390. So again, putting quite a big gap between 790 Duke and 990 Duke and bringing this one quite a bit closer to the 1390. So essentially, and this is what it signifies, is forget what reference you had in the back of your mind. Basically, we took the 890 Duke. I don't want to say throw it away because it's still a good motorcycle, but we wanted to start from scratch. So first and foremost, when as I said, we spent quite a bit of time around this motorcycle. You know, visually, I looked at the bike. I want to start with the frame because one of our goals was to improve the stability, right?
Exactly.
We were always known for having very agile motorcycles, but we found that the agility could be improved, right?
Exactly, that was the main target when we moved forward from the 890 Duke, and we say in which direction we want to develop our bike, what our customer is expecting from the new KTM 990 Duke. And basically it was stability. The agility was there, we want to keep it improving as well, but the stability in a high-speed acceleration was one of the main targets. How we ended up like that? There was a long research and development activity around the frame, and I want to show you here in the slide because probably it's even more visible. Before, on the 890 Duke, the frame was running inside of the swing arm. So basically the pivot point stays on the same place, but the frame was in the inside. Now with the KTM 990 Duke, the frame ran outside of the swing arm. That's a complete new logic also for KTM in terms of developing this frame for our naked bikes, and we realized, due to a lot of tests and draft, that basically the stability is increased with this kind of frame. It's not just a matter of construction itself, but also in terms of stiffness value. We had to adapt the new stiffness of the frame, and we can say that the new frame is way more stiffer, around 15% more than the 890 Duke.
So when Stefano mentioned stiffening up the frame, the first question I had was, did we sacrifice comfort? I mean, let's be honest, it is a sporty motorcycle, but most of the people will use it for commuting, the occasional track day. So that was the first question, did we sacrifice comfort? And I think more importantly, did we sacrifice traction?
That's the point. We always kept in mind when we develop our KTM 990 Duke that that's a bike that really has to spread in the market in a new segment. So it has to be a sporty riding for sure because it's a KTM, and also the the direction of our test rider. It's quite sporty in general, but it has also a bike that has to be used for all-day riding for a lot of customers. So that was the idea, that also with the new frame, it's stiffer, yes, but you don't get any negative point in terms of comfortability.
Okay, so let's move it along to the swing arm, because yesterday you mentioned during the 390 Duke presentation the open lattice construction, which we are quite famous for. And I mean, I think it's probably best to see it on the picture because the Akrapovic slip-on is hiding the swing arm. This is no longer an open lattice construction.
No, exactly. It's a complete new structure, as you can see here. Now it's a closed concept for the new swing arm. Basically, we kept the open construction for the joint product and for the 790 Duke, but up to the 990 Duke, we decided to go with this new structure. Basically, the stiffness value are adapted also on the swing arm according to the frame design and the stiffness. And in general, it's not just visually a closed lattice construction, it's a new production, a new technology of production for the swing arm. In general, now, the new technology, it's a gravity die cast construction compared to the one before that was pressure die cast.
Yeah.
That basically ended up in a really sharpy and aggressive design look of the swing arm itself, but even more to a reduction of the weight. Because just on the swing arm with the new construction, we get 1.5 kilogram less in terms of weight. That's quite a massive highlight. And as you mentioned before, Ian, connecting to the point of the traction, with the new swing arm, we figured out as well that the traction and the power delivery on the rear wheel is there. So it was exactly getting the output that we expect.
Okay, so far, completely new frame, new concept, new swing arm, also new concept. Let's add the engine, because that's obviously an important talking point.
Unit.
As we said in 2018, when we launched the KTM 790 Duke, we introduced the LC8C engine into the KTM lineup. It is the most compact engine in the segment, so we still claim that and we still have the bragging rights for that. Visually, again, you look at the engine, it looks very similar to what you would find in the 890 Duke or even in the R. Inside though, is it just increased bore and stroke?
That's completely the stuff that we have to forget about the increasing just of bore stroke. The engine is completely new. I even cannot go through all the points that I can mention that are new because it's a complete new development, including all the parts that create the engine. The idea that we had behind this new development of the 990 engine is in general to get even more torque, also for the mid-range bike, again to mark the gap between the 790 and find his own segment for the 990. Here with the new engine we have 103 Newton meter of torque for 123 horsepower. Quite an impressive result in the category where we are that allow us to allocate almost in the top edge of the mid-class naked bikes.
Again, something that for me that stood out is, and it's you know, that we're kind of famous for that, always looking for higher torque values. You know, for us, it's not that important to have the massive high HPs. I think very important, the benefit for the customer is if you have high torque values, you know, as we said, most of the people ride on the street, and you don't have to be in the optimum gear. You know, before you pass that car, you can really leave the thing in any gear. And I think for you guys, you would have seen it today on the track, on the 1390, third gear, it's more than enough. The chicane, any other motorcycle, you would probably have to go down to second gear. But with the torquey engine, you just leave the thing in a high gear and you can just roll on the gas. But of course, 123 horsepower is not anything to be ashamed of.
No. But in general, again, that's the point. We are always looking during the development to the final rideability of the bike. Frankly speaking, there are some engines that can be pushed a bit more in terms of horsepower, but that's not the goal, honestly. It's more in terms of having the proper riding experience and the common balance with all the parts of the bike.
Yeah. So something that you guys will definitely test in a couple of minutes is the suspension. So again, new suspension on the motorcycle, 43mm WP Apex front forks, open cartridge system, also split functionality, compression one side, rebound on the other side. Again, we've gone for the 4-click but 5 value system, and actually the 390 Duke basically took some of this logic, right,
exactly.
From the 990 Duke.
That's the logic. It's more that the 990 Duke defined the first development, and then we decided to take over the same way of not having the 30 clicks, but creating 5 adjustment setting, keeping the same range of adjustability. And basically the 390 take over the logic, but the logic came from the 990 Duke, where we say, okay, let's create something more user-friendly for a proper riding. I will suggest you, as mentioned, also yesterday, let's try it, let's test it after the photo point, just play with a couple of clicks and you will feel it immediately, we guarantee it.
I think really 1 or 2 clicks on compression on the front fork makes a massive difference. So as you said, let's leave it standard as it is, go to the photo point, after photo point give it 1 or 2 clicks, just depending on how heavy you are. I know for me I had to go maybe 3 clicks, but definitely, you know, 1 click you can feel the difference on the front fork. All right, we move it to the back. Also new rear shock, preload adjustable with the C-spanner, and again 4-click 5-value rebound setting on the rear shock. So in terms of keeping the black stuff on the road, I think we've taken care of with our WP components. So we've spoken about the frame being stiffer, we've spoken about the swing arm that's actually now we've reduced the stiffness. How important is it to match the subframe stiffness to the rest of the construction?
That's the point that we always keep in our mind, and our R&D works exactly in that direction, that when we are defining the stiffness value of the new frame, even in this case that we have a new construction from frame and swing arm, basically the third components that we take into account is the swing arm stiffness itself. Now, as you can see, we are quite make a step forward in terms of material and in terms of finish. Now our subframe start to be also a sort of design elements for the bike itself. The subframe exterior, it's out of aluminum, it's painted, but it's interesting also to mention the logic of the development with the airbox, because it's also a combination of both stuff, because in the subframe at the end you need enough capacity for the airbox. In this bike the airbox run completely under the seat with the air intake that run on the side, that allow us to have one of the, let's say, the result that we were looking for. So have a really slim fit in the front part for the seat, then getting more wider on the back for a better holding during high speed acceleration.
Yeah, and I mean, we spoke about the engine, it's got a good noise, that's first of all. Secondly, seeing that the airbox is under your butt, when you accelerate you can really hear the sucking of the air, and it gives you quite an emotional feeling and a connection to the motorcycle. But of course the subframe is also very crucial to the whole design of the motorcycle. So, you know, I mean, you work really closely with our design team as well to ensure that we hit those design lines, sharp edges, which obviously you guys defined, I would say, on Word documents really early on before you actually start with the project. All right, let's keep moving along. And this is quite an interesting talking point, because when we launched this product in November, we mentioned that we have taken the Super Duke wheels and put them on the motorcycle, essentially, in as few words as possible. And then we saw some of the comments where people were saying, yeah, but how is that possible? Because the Super Duke has a single-sided swing arm. So let's start with the front wheel. That's a 1-to-1 takeover from Super Duke, right?
That's correct. Consider that, again, marking this point that we are knocking at the door and approaching the Super Duke. The front rim, for example, is the same part number, so basically you can order for both the bikes. And for the rear, we had to adapt it, because for sure we have the different construction for the swing arm, but the development, the technology used is exactly the same as on the Super Duke.
Now, if we take a step back a couple of years in 2020, when we launched the Super Duke, the Beast 3.0, we actually introduced a completely new design and construction of the wheels, which back then we saved massive unsprung mass in weight. We also added Bridgestone S22 tires. And if we look at what we have in front of us now, we've taken the knowledge that we've gained back then and put it onto this motorcycle. So again, as you said, really knocking on the door of the Super Duke and taking inspiration from it. So, okay, so we're good with suspension, engine good, chassis good, wheels, tires. We're slowly but surely assembling this motorcycle. One of the things that came up in the discussion is, you mentioned to me that for this motorcycle, it has to be Euro 5 plus compliant. And I must be honest, I was a bit worried because I know that means more catalytic converters, more lambda sensors, and my initial concern was that we were going to have this massive cannon of an exhaust pipe at the back. I don't know, you guys have managed to keep it pretty small. Actually, in terms of volume, it's very similar to the Akrapovic. How did you manage to achieve Euro 5 plus compliance, but keep the silencer as small as possible?
It's a general wall construction of the new engine. You can see the final exhaust there and on the bike that you will ride later, but also the Acra is quite referenced, because in terms of volume of the exhaust and stuff, it's quite similar. Basically, when we start to develop the new engine and the new frame and swing arm, we try to integrate as much as possible all the not shiny, not cool parts, but that we have to bring into the technology to be compliant with Euro 5 Plus. So basically, we create some space to have the catalytic converter and the 3 lambda sensor that are completely covered under the motorbike and in the swing arm, so that at the end the part that you will get out is just a muffler with the less volume that you need really to be homologated.
Yeah, interesting, man. Okay, let's start moving along. I think one of the parts that we can actually say that is one of the carryover parts
that we decide to...
Yeah, is the brakes. Tell us about the brakes and why do we, because initially my assumption was why do we not put Brembos on here, or we would put Brembos on here, but we have not gone for the Brembos. What's the reason for that?
The reason in general is that the brakes, as mentioned, is one of the few parts that are takeover from the 890 Duke. Really, it's probably the only one visible and so impactful on the general bike. We have such a good partnership with the brake supplier, and the performance at the end was really a key point for the previous model that we decided to keep it. But as we are in KTM, we never just take over a part from one motorbike and we bring it into the other, because we make a massive upgrade in the front disc. Basically, the bracket that connects the front disc to the rim, now it's way more lighter than the one before. Consider that for each side, we were able to save 500 grams. So we have 1 kilogram less in the rotating part of the bike, that brings us to a reduction of the unsprung rotating mass. Again, even if it was not our main target, reducing all this weight in the front will bring to the bike to even a more agility and even a more twisty road cornering change. It's even more easier and easier.
So up front, we've got 300mm brake discs, 4-piston monoblock calipers. On the back, we got a 240mm disc. So in terms of stopping power, we've got plenty of that. Let's have a chat about electronics. And I don't want to talk about the electronics that should be standard on the bike, and most of the guys know that we have standard on our KTM models. So let's not talk about Supermoto, ABS and all the different ride modes. Which features set this motorcycle apart, and actually which features take it a little bit closer to the 1390?
Okay, let's focus on track mode. Your bike will be set in track mode, that is not anymore as yesterday that we defined as the track screen. So it was just a visualization. Here on the KTM 990 Duke, track mode will allow you to customize your bike according to your riding expectation. First of all, sleep adjuster. With the sleep adjuster, you can set it from 0, that it's completely off, also the traction control, up to 9. And basically you can select the angle that allow you to sleep your rear during high acceleration. The really interesting stuff is also that we have the complete new switch cubes on the bike, and we have a pedal on the bottom with plus and minus, and you can adjust the sleep adjuster on all the settings from 0 to 9 during your riding. So if you feel that the tarmac is changing from one corner to the other, you can modify the bike instantly, and I confirm it that the bike will change its behavior. Another one that now we change also our name, it's no more anti-wheelie.
Yeah, because let's be honest, anti-wheelie wasn't very ready to race.
Sexy, yeah?
No, it was not sexy.
It was not cool. Now it's a wheelie control. With wheelie control, the motorbike can detect the angle of your wheelie. Basically, to have a control one, we can move from very low, low, medium, high, very high, and off. So the idea is no more just that you can have on and off the wheelie control, but it's more that you can decide up to which level you want to have your wheelie. The logic behind this development of this new wheelie control is that when you are in a corner and you get out and you go on the throttle, you can have a control wheelie out of the corner without the risk to flipping, basically.
But I mean, also with KTM, obviously safety for us is important, but what's more important is going fast. So it's to keep forward drive. As you said, whichever setting you have it on, it will always cut the power, but please, laws of physics do apply.
Yeah,
I think this is
always
important.
part of the game.
Yeah. Hey, one of the features that we didn't talk about is, I mean, you mentioned the track screen and how you have reduced information, because honestly, you don't really care about speed, you don't care about time, it's RPM, but something that's very cool is telemetry. Explain to the guys how that works on the 990 Duke.
Yeah, the telemetry screen that you will have in the track mode with this shiny red display visualization. Basically, with the telemetry screen, we really try to focus inside the PM team, saying what is essential for a rider to have during your riding experience, to be completely involved in that. And we figure out some really key interesting data. For example, in the dashboard, you will see your lean angle, the current one and the maximum that you have, and you can basically also challenge the other while you are riding. You have also the throttle position that you see in percentage, and also acceleration and deceleration. We call it also a sort of gamification of the experience to create even a more immersive experience during your riding.
What did you get to?
48.
48. 49. Someone yesterday got
For
to
sure.
someone yesterday got to 100. 100. No, don't do that.
Please don't do it.
Don't do that. Don't do that. All right, so we got all this electronics. Now, I mean, you take a couple of years, a step back a couple of years. It was difficult to navigate. You know, it was text. It was basically the dashboard was overwhelmed with text. And I know theoretically, before we start riding, we should set up our motorbike and then ride. But I know for most of us, we start riding and then we start figuring out where's the ABS, where is what settings. So changing the pictograms to pictograms on our motorcycle has obviously given us a massive step forward. But also I think first and foremost, the startup, very cool 30 years of Duke startup animation. So first of all, I think that's pretty cool. But also explain to us these pictograms and how a rider benefits from it.
Yeah, the logic of the pictogram is that we were completely bored on having numbers on the dashboard that numbers doesn't give an explanation. You need your user manual, check what the number means, and then adapt on the bike. With the pictograms now, you can properly see what's the riding effect according to the modification that you are doing. Like with wheelie control, you can see the angle. With the slider adjuster, you can see as well how much you can move your rear. Again, the logic is just to let you know what to expect from your bike during your riding.
Yeah, and I mean, standard 5-inch TFT dash, bonded glass, scratch resistance, glare resistance. But as I said, let's not talk about the things that we should have. But I think one of the things, as you said, is this track screen. For me, it's super cool. We urge you guys definitely to try it out. So if we now start assembling this bike a little bit more, you know, you made quite a bold statement to say knocking on the door of the 1390. As we said, very premium finishes on the motorcycle. All the parts on the motorcycle painted, so I think that's highest level that you can in terms of technology. The motorcycle has stepped upwards to actually, as you said, knock on the door. Fuel-wise, 14.5 litre steel fuel tank, which should give you 300 kilometers of range. You will not get that today, 100% not, because we're going to send it. We're going to be going fast. But explain to us what goes into a design of a motorcycle like this.
First of all, this shiny orange, it's electronic orange, and this is the color that we decide to bring on all the Dukes, basically to celebrate the 30 years of Duke. So you will have this color just for this year and next year. But let's talk a bit more about the shape of the bike. When we develop it, we work quite a lot with the Kishka, our agency, and they say that they want really to approach the Super Duke also in terms of design shapes, because we broke them all the technological part that are shared, and so also the design has to follow the same manner. As you can see, the tank spoiler, it really grow up and get up to the front, and that's really a logic quite well known from the Super Duke, while the bike is getting really slimmer in the central area. Really interesting is this surface, the knee contact point. We make quite a lot of focus on this area to let you always keep control of the bike thanks to your knees and be able really to control the bike directly with the legs and not massive force on your hands. In general, the bike is all painted, as Rian mentioned, painted with the overcoated stickers. That's the same technology that we have also in the Super Duke. Why the same? Because basically it's the highest technology that you can have for a production bike. So in terms of color, trim and graphic, this bike really it's a premium finish in all the parts.
So really no compromise when it came to, as we said, no one would have thought anything of it if we used, for example, the old frame. But no compromise, clean piece of paper, let's start from scratch. Let's introduce the headlight, because actually when we launched the product at EICMA, on social media there was quite a lot of negative comments on the front headlight. You know, there were words like Predator, Interstellar, all weird kind of names. And honestly, when we looked at the photos, we said, yeah, it doesn't look so super sexy on photos. But in real life, I think we saw with the journalists there that there was a massive shift in their opinion.
That was exactly the point. The comment from the people that just saw the picture and the people that then saw the bike physically changed completely. So the headlight unit of the bike is not, for example, a takeover from the Super Duke, but it's a combined development. So our design agency, as that they start to define the clay with the final shape of the bike, they say, okay, we have to do a headlight that then combine the two bikes and be fully integrated with the general shape of the bike. We ended up with this really cool element. Again, the Duke's madness, as we call it, is something that is really recognizable almost in all the case from the front headlight. And we want to keep this stylistic identity, let's say, also in the new models. LED position lights that run on the side, high and low beam in the center. Now we solve also the issue that we know that we came from the previous bike, that there was this sort of cutting in the center of the headlight unit, that when the lights, let's say it was not so complete and not covering all the roads area, but we have still a cut there. Now it's solved.
Yeah, actually, I mean, the previous headlight performed really well, but as you said, at night there was definitely a hard cut, so good visibility to a point, hard cut. Now with the knee light, we've actually got some stray lights, so yeah, again, safety a lot better, but also performance. On the headlight on the motorcycle, it's a funny thing because it's very disruptive. And we also, when we saw the motorcycle the first time, we said, okay, that is really very, very edgy. We also have to align our communication. So, you know, when you look at the communication that we used, words like no bullshit, you know, really pure, and we wanted to align the communication with the motorcycle. And that's what Duke is. Either you love it or you hate it, and it's not for everyone. And, you know, we're completely okay with that. But as you said, very distinctive Duke face, and it needed to stand out. All right, so same as yesterday, and I think later or earlier on for 1390 as well. Knock on the door for marketing at the end of the development. Give me a percentage.
The KTM 990 Duke, if we make a step back really fast, so new frame, new swing arm, new subframe, new shapes, new headlight, new engine as well, new tank, bring us to compare the bill of material to the 890 Duke, and the bike it's 96% new. That's again to mark that we are not just talking, we are not just bringing here cool presentation, say new in one side, new in the other, but that's our facts. The bike it's completely new. As we mentioned, we have the front brake that we decide to bring it to take over from the bike, and honestly there are not a lot of other parts that I can mention on top of screws and bushing.
Yeah. I think that's one thing, you know, as I said, these guys get frankly pretty pissed off with us when we start asking for the number, because they literally have to go through the bill of material. We asked them to remove bolts and screws because, okay, yeah, that doesn't count. But again, I think that's quite a solid number to actually see it visually. And actually, you didn't even know it either, did you?
No, exactly, because also from our side, when they came, the marketing department knocked at the door of the PM, we don't know as well, because we follow the project in such a long way that, okay, one part is new, one part is a rehash, whatever, but at the end you don't figure out how much you are really bringing new in a motorcycle, and that's really the moment when we say, okay, wow, we did it.
Yeah, we did it, yeah. All right, so let's quickly talk about power parts. This specific motorcycle is dressed with all the power parts that's available. I mean, one of the definite must-haves is the carbon fiber undertray. It looks super sexy. We got triple clamps on this specific model. We've got the Pro Components front forks, the rear shock. We also have the Akrapovic Evo line exhaust pipe, which gives you 5 horsepower increase. We have a slip-on Akrapovic, which there's actually no horsepower gain, but reduction in weight, and it sounds cool, as well as a Remus. I don't want to talk about the power parts too much, but something I want to focus on is actually at the end of the development. It was 1 week before our shooting. July last year, walked into the marketing workshop. Both myself and Stefano looked at the motorcycle and we said, hey man, something's off. And what it actually was is, if you imagine this exhaust pipe, you can see it runs really in the same line as the subframe at the back. When we walked into the workshop, we actually had the silencer slightly down, and we said, yeah, R&D is going to kill us, but we have to change that. So we've got 2 brackets essentially. We've got the carbon bracket, right? And then we've got the standard, which has got the rear passenger peg, and they're different in angle. Please explain to us why.
Exactly, there is a logic behind that. This is the really last minute development that we decided to take because it looks quite sharp. We like this alignment between the muffler and the tail, but we were not able to do it for the standard bike, but we did it on purpose. So why the standard muffler has not the same angle? Because basically we redefined the shape of the standard footrest. Because from the 890 Duke we got the feedback that the knee angle was a bit too tight, and so the passenger in terms of comfortability was not in the best situation ever. So we decided to change the brackets, and that allows us to move the standard exhaust a bit down. But as you can see, if you purchase then the TA1, we really work it out to have exactly the same lies end of the tail.
All right, so we're gonna cut the bullshit now and go right. Yes. All right, guys,
let's go.
Okay, the box.